So Natalie, talk us through, you've got a new course coming and you talked about there was 4 pillars and it'd been quite nice to get a little flavour of these pillars because I think they're all really fascinating. So you said it was nutrition, neuroscience,
habits and healing.
She can tell you, it's not a memory test.
Yeah,
habits and healing. Does it make an is it a good
no,
what do
it
call
doesn't
it?
work.
No.
Yeah,
I'm just trying to
I
think
thought
of one
about
for
trying to
you.
make
No.
it fit, and then I was like, you know what, it is what it is. So I'm going with this. At least there's a little bit of alliteration there, so I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
NNHH.
Oh shit.
That's no, it's not working, is it? No.
Yeah.
But yeah, so the neuroscience we spoke about already, it's kind of understanding your brain and a little bit of what it does and what it needs to do its best work, which leads into nutrition. I'd probably say, although I refer to them as pillars, I'd almost put them in a circle because there's no starting and ending of one going into the other. They're all parts of the same whole because your nutrition affects your brain and your habits affect your nutrition. And they all lead into each other. And underneath all of that, the healing part is one of the things I discovered underneath all of my stuff was that for the majority of us, we're carrying feelings of not being good enough or very conditional ways in which we see ourselves as good or acceptable. And so quite a lot of the stress we experience is actually when we bump up against those beliefs. So for me, the feeling of not good enough was so deeply rooted that actually part of what made my parenting journey so difficult was that my not good enoughness was so deeply triggered that everything felt unmanageable to me. But when you take that feeling out and you say, actually, I'm good enough exactly as I am. There's nothing that needs fixed. Yes, there are things I can learn. Yes, there are things I can do, but I'm not broken and I don't need fixed. And that's taken an enormous amount of coaching, therapy, work on my own, journaling, meditation, a whole host of different things to really kind of pull out why, for me, I had developed this need for everything to be perfect. And if it wasn't perfect, then I was basically just useless and nothing and awful. And so the healing part of the program deals with that stuff, like the feelings that we've taken on, that we beat ourselves up with, that critic, because the critic took shape in the context of the relationships in which we grew up. The critic wasn't there when we were born, but a lot of us have gotten so used to it, we think it's us, and we think it's just who I am, it's just how I am, but it isn't. It's a learned pattern, and it's a habitual pattern, and it can be dismantled. And so probably that has been one of the biggest pieces for me that has helped me to release when I do get upset or when I do get things wrong, the fact that it's no longer a reflection of my worth as a human. That releases a lot of the weight of some of the experiences that previously just were far too heavy for me to carry.
That's really interesting.
Yeah.
And so the habit side of it, because I know that's a big speciality of yours. A lot of people have really high motivation to change, and then they try, and then they fail. And that's why we get a lot of people coming to the Detox Barn.
And I think actually, sorry, just to add, as you get older, when you have attempted so many times and you have failed, you then actually stop trying.
Yes.
You sort of think, I can never achieve this. I'm not even going to bother anymore.
Yeah. So what's your advice for people that are trying to change?
Actually, I have an ebook that I can give you to share if you want to, that has sort of 10 steps to help with that.
That's great.
Yeah. The basic thing that I would say, well, there's 2 probably key things. Number 1 is it's useful to figure out what motivated you in the first place. Because what I find, and this is where the healing part of that whole thing comes in, what I find for a lot of us, myself included, when I first started doing this work, often what's driving us to make the changes is that we hate ourselves the way we are. So it's like, I'm so fat, I want to lose weight. Or I hate how I look in jeans, I want to lose weight. Or, whatever the thing is, I'm so disgusted with myself, I want to do this, and so on. But at some point down the road, you start getting results. So your source of motivation dries up if your source of motivation was how bad you looked. Because you don't look bad anymore. Now you look good, and you're like, oh, good, yay, I'm done. So the first thing to look at is, if you are motivated by something that as soon as that thing goes away, you won't be motivated anymore, you don't have a source of motivation that's going to get you to the finish line.
Yeah, I get what you're saying.
Yeah.
So it's a bit like I don't need to lose weight, but I exercise a lot, not for weight loss. Because if I then had achieved the goal, I might stop. But because my motivation is just to feel good.
Yeah.
So that motivation can last. Is that
yes.
What you're
So
saying? Rather than
absolutely. So if you exercised only because you hated what your legs looked like, then the minute you stop hating your legs, there's no reason to exercise anymore.
And then you go back.
Most people do, yeah. So that's one part.
So then you have to change the hatred.
Yes. That's one part, and that's not true for everybody. It's true for some people. The other thing is, once you've tried it multiple times, you develop a story, and it becomes part of your identity. I'm too lazy. I've got no willpower. I just am not disciplined enough. And it becomes an I am statement, which, again, how our thought processes and how our brains work, the idea of you becoming somebody completely different than who you think you are is so destabilizing that it's much safer to be right about that stuff and to fail repeatedly. Because, like, if you suddenly become somebody who has this, like, wicked willpower, who are you then? Because that's a big part of the last 10 years, 12 years, 14, 20, 30 years of your life. Was it true? Did you trick yourself? Like, it's a destabilizing place to be when your story comes loose. So again, a lot of what people would benefit from doing is actually recognizing that it is just a story. It's not a truth. It's not an identity. It's a pattern you've replicated multiple times, but it's still only a story. There are other available storylines. But that said, habits are quite difficult to change. They're meant to be. Like, the reason habits work is because we don't have full access to all the parts of a habit. Like, a lot of it has been handed over to the unconscious mind, and we don't just get to go in there and tinker with stuff all the time. So I think the other thing is, people would benefit from being kind to themselves and recognizing that, if all of your habits just easily came loose, you would literally have to question whether or not to wash yourself each day, or brush your teeth, or get out of bed. You'd have to think consciously and make decisions about how to do all the pieces of making a cup of tea or a cup of coffee, all the different things that go with that. Buttering toast, like, everything becomes difficult if habits come loose easily. So they're not meant to. And so I guess when people start to see that and start to recognize that you are, in order to get a habit to come loose, you do have to delve a little bit into the unconscious, and you do have to give yourself time to figure out how to do that. And when you do, the things to look for are, what is the reward you're getting from doing the behavior? It's always emotional, and it's always a direct link to the behavior. So, I mean, people will say, like, the reward you get from a chocolate bar is the taste. But behind that is a feeling. And so I would usually encourage people to get to the feeling, because then the aim of the exercise becomes, what other behavior can you put in place that will still lead you to the feeling? Because that's effectively what you're seeking.
Yeah.